Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Third Space Podcast, episode number 51. This is Bennett, and in this episode, Daniel and I cover a handful of topics. Talk about some dog poop and snow. Daniel is curious about the sentience of AI. We talk about whether AI can be sentient, is sentient, what is sentience? Is it the same as a soul? Well, we at least ask those questions. And then I bring up the topic of Munchausen Syndrome by Proxy, a really interesting disorder. Normally you think about disorders being applied to a particular individual, but this is a disorder by an individual propagated on another, so by proxy. Very interesting. We talk about what it is, why it might happen, and what some of the broader effects in society of that might be. I found it really interesting, and I hope you will too. Enjoy.
Third Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast.
Bennett,
Daniel, how are you doing today?
here's something annoys you
Well,
these days.
Yeah, it's people who force me to talk about things immediately when I don't introduce the topic.
Well, how much small talk do you think is necessary, even for like a podcast? Like, why can't I just go?
You can.
So here's something that annoys you these days.
can't.
Why couldn't that be my opening? Why do I have to say your name?
You don't have to do that. You caught me off guard is all.
But I also think that that's the thing. It does catch you off guard. It feels jarring. Like I need to say your name and greet you, and
I don't really think
even good friends, I think, do.
I don't think you need to. I just think, since everyone in society does that, I'm used to it, and so it surprises me when that doesn't happen. But actually, I kind of like it. It's a little bit novel in a way, and it makes me almost excited to jump into whatever it is immediately without all of this.
Let me delay you slightly
hemming and
further.
hawing. Okay.
What about ending conversations? There's always kind of a, well, that ought to do it kind of vibe to conversations.
Yeah.
So there's a song and dance to the beginning and to the end. It would be just as jarring to say, like, all right, information gathered by, and like didn't wait for you, because I don't need you to actually do your... I don't need your permission to leave the conversation, and the information was exchanged, and the relationship's already there, but yet everyone, including us, we kind of have this like,
So let me.
do you agree? I agree. Okay.
I think the ending formalities are a little bit more important than the beginning formalities, because if you end abruptly, then it leaves the other person feeling like they were used by the conversation in a way, like
True, I agree with that.
And there's some amount of closure that you want to attain. You want to make sure that both people got what they wanted or needed out of this interaction, out of the conversation. And so, I'm ready to end the conversation. Are you ready to end the conversation? Yes. Okay. And then conversation ended. Whereas at the beginning, like, jumping straight into it doesn't signify any kind of disrespect or being used or whatever. It's just, let's get right to it. So that it seems a little different to me.
Transitions are similar, though. They're almost like the ending of one part of the conversation and kind of saying, are you, testing the waters of, are you ready? And so it's just strange to change topics absolutely suddenly. So what annoys you?
Speaking of transition, okay, you did it. All right. So it's springtime. The snow here where I am is all melting away for the first time. It's kind of been piled up for all of the all of the winter, and now that the snow has melted, strewn across the apartment grounds, beside the sidewalks, and even on the sidewalks in some cases, is dog crap. Lots of it. Many piles of dog crap, which I guess people took their dogs for a walk during the winter. At any point, the dogs crapped in the snow. It got covered up, mummified like a mammoth or a Neanderthal, and buried in the pure white flakes of nature. And now that all the snow is melting away. There's just turds everywhere.
Neanderthal poop. Yeah.
There's turds.
Well, I'm just confused. There's an agreement with dogs is that you pick up your dog's poop.
That's
and
what I thought.
everyone's universally annoyed about not picking it up.
Yeah.
So is there an unspoken agreement in the cold weather that you don't have to or should not somehow because it's not visible shortly
I don't
thereafter?
know.
I mean,
I think, well, all right. I am annoyed with dog owners for a variety of reasons.
yeah.
And this is one of them. Like, you say it's an unspoken agreement to always clean up after your dog. And to me, it seems kind of like this is something imposed upon dog owners that none of them want to do. They do begrudgingly so that they can maintain their pets.
They might even look around if no one's around,
and
just
leave it.
Let it ride.
Yeah. And no one joyfully picks up dog turds, like that just doesn't happen.
It's a confrontation of the oddity of the relationship. You have this great little, like, this animal that loves you, dogs love you, man's best friend, all of that. And then you go like, wait a second, I'm picking up their poop. It feels like I'm the servant. I'm the one gets the raw end of this deal. Like, and I think that confrontation with reality is unpleasant at best. It's an annoyance at best. And so you're right, like, they don't want to, but they know. It's not like they don't know there's a cultural and societal agreement. Like, pick up your poop, pick up the poop.
Yeah.
It would just be ridiculous, especially with dog owners on the rise, as we discussed in a previous podcast, and like more and more are owning. Like, we can't just have poop everywhere.
No.
And like complexes are better and better about putting little trash bags in disposable areas and making it easier and easier. And a lot of these leashes are designed with like little bags rolled up in them. I don't know if you've seen that. Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, that's a neat design in terms of just from a concept stance. Anyway, so like, it's just suck it up and do it. It's like, I don't like doing laundry, but I just do it. I mean, like, it's part of life. And if you own a dog, that's just something you have to get on board with.
I mean, I totally agree. Unless you live on your own land in the woods or whatever, and let your dog go in the yard, whatever. But if you're on public grounds or in an apartment complex or something, you should always pick up after your dog. Now, I can, just trying to think of the practical difficulties of this, when it's very cold and snowy, maybe they're wearing gloves and
tough.
I know,
man.
No, dude, like, I totally get it. I agree. You should have to,
tough shit. That's funny.
There we go. Because
right. It will get tough if it gets cold and then everything thaws and now you have... I mean, that sounds like it's noticeable is what you're saying. Like, it's like, oh, here's a winter's worth of dog poop everywhere.
It's shocking. Like, you go look and it's just everywhere. And it's not like normally in an apartment complex, you probably see one or two piles of dog poop where people have just not picked up and they're just being jerks and left it around. But this is like the accumulation of jerk behavior over 3 or 4 months now. And
it could be 2 or 3 dogs, because if they're pooping a couple of times a day, then they're,
There's a lot of dogs. And the dogs all poop, to my knowledge.
But I'm saying only a couple of owners. I mean, it's the theory of like like if there's a trashy gas station or something, you think, oh, people here must leave their trash behind. But it could literally be several people day after day coming by.
Right.
Like it's a kind of a rotten apple spoils the whole bunch kind of thing. Like, it really could. If let's just say you have 30%, maybe higher dog owners in your apartment complex, then it could still be 2-3 bad owners. A season's worth of poop per dog. That would be quite a bit of poop. And now I'm thinking, only a couple would have to do that to make it noticeable and frustrating.
Well, the maintenance staff here where I live, there's only 2 of them, but it's their unfortunate job now to go around and collect all of the dog crap that's laying around, and like they're like filling a big bag with it. And I'm just thinking, like, man, what is going to happen to that bag? Like a garbage bag, like a big bag of dog turds. Like, where is that going to go?
Could it become fertilizer?
I mean, maybe. I don't know. But it's just, how often do you see in that quantity? Like, I don't know.
By the way, this is a random thought, but I have this vivid image growing up of a lot of older dog poop being white, and and it just isn't
like E.T.
anymore.
There was always some association between white dog turds and E.T. When E.T. gets sick and he turns white, like a powdered donut.
Yeah.
I've always had that
You have a
association.
strong association.
Yeah, it's just always been that association in my head.
Is it fair to say though that so it's true, the white
Yeah.
dog poop is just like that's true, and it also seems to be true, and this might not be, but it's not there anymore. Like, has dog food potentially changed and gotten better, and they realized, oh, in the 80s and 90s we were filling, and or maybe early 2000s we were filling it with this bad filler, and now they've got a better cheap filler, and it's not white anymore.
You're saying?
I mean, I have no idea.
You're
I'm
saying it's
speaking
not there
completely-
anymore? It doesn't turn
I'm
white?
saying I don't see white crusty dog poop anymore. Like, I still see crusty dog poop or whatever, but I've just not seen that distinct white. Like, like I cannot say that I've seen that in, say, 10 years.
Wow.
I mean,
Okay,
like,
so
it feels like a childhood memory.
I haven't
you know,
paid
and
that much attention. I'll have to go take a walk later. And
Well, I'm pulling from a vague, like, this is so vague for me to say any of this, but it just occurred to me. I was visualizing the dog poop and going, oh, I'm having a hard time. Like, would it be white or not? Because I don't, wait, is dog poop white? Certainly it is. Wait a second. I don't think I've seen white dog poop in years and years. So
I don't actually know what the white is. Like, is it some kind of mold or mildew or something that grows on it? If that's the case, then maybe it depends on the area, where the dog poop
But it doesn't
is.
seem like I think of cat poop or, like, say, rat turds or different, it distinctly seems like a dog, and therefore I'm just guessing dog food.
Can you distinguish cat poop and dog poop by sight?
I would just assume size.
Yeah.
But no, I honestly, and potentially more pellet-like from a cat. You and I are not we're like hilariously discussing something that we know very little about. So, but it feels like the answer would be yes. If I had a dog and a cat, I'd easily be able to do it. But I can't. I would just think smaller, and I don't know why I want to say pellet. I mean, don't they? They
I
tend
don't think
to.
cats have
Do cats
pellet
care more for their poop? They don't have pellet poop, but I mean, they kind of, for me, it's a little mysterious going in the what's the word I'm looking for? The litter box, and and I don't know, like, what is kitty litter? And I've heard people equate it to, like, they get a little high from it. Like, it's like they love it.
That's catnip.
Like,
You're thinking catnip.
That's it. Never mind. So all of this cat world stuff is a little mysterious, and I'm just like, yeah, whatever, don't care. So I've never
shouldn't care. All of it is just the emanations of toxoplasmosis, the parasite infecting those people's brains and controlling them. So better you not think about it.
But what is catnip anyway? What do you buy catnip? You buy some catnip and go, hey, here, like, instead of giving them a toy?
Yeah,
like,
I think it's like cocaine for cats. It's like it comes from a plant, I think. I don't really know.
But do you buy it? Does it come as, like, do you mix it in the kitty litter? Like, what do
No,
you,
you
how
don't.
do you serve
There's totally
catnip
separate from kitty litter, I think. Like,
do you put it in a cat bowl and say, here, kitty,
Yeah,
kitty, and let them just eat it or sniff it? Or
I think
what are they doing?
Yeah, I think they inject it. I think they have little syringes that they
Little needles, and
Right.
they heat it up on some
on
little
a spoon.
bowl. And
Yeah, a little
yeah.
cute cat spoon.
They tie a little band around their arms to get or paws and legs. And, yeah,
Oh, man.
I don't know.
There's got to be a lot of
Catnip,
good
man.
puns in there. That's just not coming to mind. Yeah, no, I think it's food. I guess like some kind of gross food that they eat, and they just freaking love it. I don't know why.
I mean, is it you sprinkle it over? Is it a
No,
dust?
I don't
is
think
it a
so.
powder?
I don't know, but I think it's like wet dog food. I think it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
You get it in a can and it's wet. I think.
Do you have to be careful and be like, this is catnip, like this is literally like cocaine to kittens, so we have to
have to
like
cut
you can't
it.
just give it to them every meal. You can't. Yeah, you have to cut it and like prepare it and like I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, so dog poop, it's annoying, right?
That's just my annoyance. That's all I got. I just wanted to express to you how annoyed I was by it.
Yeah. There's no solutions. I don't have like a good answer for you, but I do know that when I try to get, if I'm in the position of telling kids to pick up their trash, I will say things like, like I like the idea of personalizing the janitorial staff. Oftentimes I get to know them and talk to them, and then I think about what it would be like to have to pick up people's trash. Just like I said, you have to accept the deal when you have a dog and that you've got to pick up their poop. You'd have to do something interesting, as if your job was picking up trash. You could get really bitter really quick, particularly at a school.
Yeah.
Particularly at a school, an independent school with like privileged kids, and just being mad about them putting like you as an adult is picking up this trash left behind by kids.
And they're dropping like $100 bills crumpled around.
Yeah, all of that
and stuff.
I'm just saying, I understand it would be so annoying, but you'd have to just bury that and say it's my job. I'm just picking up stuff. But at the same time, I think potentially it's not a guilt trip as much as just trying to humanize. Like someone has to pick this up. It's Kenny, and Kenny's a nice guy. Like don't make his job easier, won't you? Like don't just leave your stuff behind. Mm-hmm. And that really I don't try to lecture and get preachy about it, but I just dude, pick up your stuff.
Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll hang some posters around with my face on them and say, like, hey, I live here too. And, if you don't pick up your dog crap, I'll complain about it on a podcast that only a few people listen to. And really try to bring it home to them.
And you have, puppy dog eyes, and, it's in black and white. This is Meet Bennett. Bennett is annoyed easily by your dog poop.
I'm a very sympathetic figure. I'm sure that would get some change. Actually, I think my apartment complex is going with the stick route and not the carrot route. They said they're installing a camera in the dog park to monitor, I guess. And if you don't pick up your dog poop, then the first offense is like $150 fine. The second is like a $350 fine.
I like it. You gotta,
man, you gotta lay down the law.
As a complex, you just gotta say these are the rules, and the rules already. And now this is your warning,
Yeah.
We got one recently that said, if you smell marijuana, call the police.
Oh, jeez.
And it was like, whoa.
Call the president.
It was like, and we will call the cops and we will prosecute to the full extent of the law. It was just a really intense. I don't know if it seemed to me that they must have gotten some complaints. And they were tired of the complaints, and they're like, "All right, this is hardball."
Right.
And so, whatever. I got a question for you.
Okay, got an answer for you.
It's a complete subject shift.
That's what I like.
I've been thinking a lot about AI, and I'll just ask the question: do you think artificial intelligence, even in theory, not how close are we to it, but in theory, can it reach sentience?
Define sentience.
Can it be self-aware and set goals independent of its creator? And anything else you want to add? You can help me construct this idea. It's the self-aware aspect.
It's a complicated idea, I
guess can it have a soul?
Yeah,
is really
that's where we're going. Yeah,
that's where we're going.
My answer is no for that reason. I don't think you can artificially construct a soul. We get into the metaphysics of it really fast, because people would say, "Oh, well, humans are just biological machines. We're just a collection of molecules that accumulate in certain ways to build tissues and organs and."
And we're trillions and trillions of neurons firing, and that's super complex, but it's still it still can be
still machinery,
deduced.
Still biological machinery. And if you can make biological machinery that can be sentient, why could you not make something made of silicon and metal and plastic that could be sentient? That's the argument.
Yeah.
And my answer is, well, disappointing, because it's metaphysical. It's humans have souls. We have something unique about us that distinguishes us from every other life form that we've ever encountered, every other artificial construct that we've ever encountered, and we've never once seen anything else that has the same sort of consciousness that we do. And until I see some evidence that can be attained elsewhere, then I just think that there's something unique about human beings.
I think it'd be stupid to push back and say, well, we're not that unique. We're definitely unique.
Yes.
But are we confusing? I just want to play devil's advocate and say, well, yes, we're unique in that we are wildly complex. But just because we're mind-bogglingly complex currently doesn't mean that can't be mapped or mined and turned into a code, can't be codified over time. Maybe we're not even. I seriously think. Well, here's what I think right now is that AI. People talk about sentience, and it's really because it's easy to replicate actions, and those actions we confuse for like thoughtfulness, right? So it can appear. It's very clear to me that we're so wildly far from it right now, even though ChatGPT or whatever can appear to talk to you, can appear to have a personality. But it's truly just holding up a bunch of mirrors and seeming like it has a personality, seeming like if we feed it thoughts and it regurgitates thoughts, then it looks like it's thinking.
Right. Well, think about this. I mean, this is something that we talked about previously about anthropomorphization of animals, right? A lot of pet owners truly think that their dog can understand them or has the same emotions, and they interact with them as if they are people. And if it's easy for a dog who can't speak other than, woof, like they can't actually speak words, if people can confuse that for, human-like consciousness, then surely they can confuse an AI, which may be able to use language, synthesize speech, be housed in some sort of human-looking droid body or something in the future, or hologram or whatever, hovering AI of the future. Those same people would definitely be confused, and I think many more people would be confused and assume that there's something there, there's some spark, there's a soul there, when it's really not. And it's complicated even further because, we don't even know what a soul really is. Consciousness is one of the great mysteries that we still have in front of us. We don't understand it. We don't know what it is, how it works. We can't create it in a lab. So it's a mystery from multiple angles.
Are you using consciousness and having a soul as the same, like interchangeably?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, because
there are nuanced differences that you can argue about between sentience, being conscious, and having a soul, but I think that the distinctions are, for the broad purposes, meaningless.
Well, can I just say that I feel like you could make a compelling case that a dog is conscious in that, like, it's not just responding to stimuli as much as like it seems to experience happiness and sadness and
you can make that
relationship with things.
You can make,
and so I feel comfortable saying a dog's conscious.
Sure,
but I don't feel comfortable saying they have a soul or.
Yeah, you can make that argument, and that's what I'm saying. Like, you can have those nuanced discussions around the edges, but I think that in the broad sense, the distinctions are pretty meaningless.
Well, the reason this is interesting to me is because I think you could say, I'm prepared to say that AI is vastly more complex, maybe, and intelligent more than a dog, but a dog is conscious and an AI is totally not. But I don't even know if when I say intelligent and complex, like AI is more intelligent and potentially more, I wouldn't say more complex than, say, me personally, like Daniel, but it's definitely has computing power and more facts loaded into it than I do. But I just wanted to like distinguish, like, okay,
I mean,
like,
I think
for the sake of the argument, can you go with a dog being conscious and yet way stupider than AI? Like, this is interesting, right? There's an interesting case.
I mean, you have to define what you mean by intelligence. Then, I mean, I don't know. I don't know that you could call AI intelligent. I mean, the mechanisms behind what it's doing when it's taking an IQ test, for example, are so totally different than what humans are doing when they're taking an IQ test, or what dogs are doing when they're doing whatever doggy IQ test there is.
So what is AI doing when it's problem solving and quote unquote learning? We use these terms pretty readily to say, like, look at it learn, look at it problem solve.
It depends on how what methodology the AI is using under the hood, but I mean, essentially AI benefits from vast quantities of memory because, it's just computer memory, huge processing speed, and the ability to very rapidly query its memory without loss and perform mathematical computations to associate things. And so learning And many of the ways that AI works is done by repeated exposure to something. If it's supervised learning, meaning there's a human or some other method telling it right from wrong, then it associates all of the rights from wrongs and essentially makes kind of a weighting number, weight, weighting number, and it uses that statistically when presented with a novel case, a new question. It compares this new case to all of the old cases, uses whatever this weighting is that it's established, and then makes a decision based on that.
So are you comfortable saying that it does become more advanced, it does grow, or that it is doing that? Like, clearly it's doing that, right? It's growing and becoming more advanced.
What is it growing? I mean, more advanced, I don't know. It depends on what you mean. Like,
more useful,
it's
maybe.
Accumulating more things to compare to, and it is polishing and honing its function that allows it to compare. Its comparison functions, I guess, if you want to try to find a term.
So it will continue to,
but it doesn't understand.
More...
There's no understanding there.
Like, it fundamentally doesn't understand. So it's not growing toward understanding. It's just getting more efficient and more useful. Is that a better way to?
It's fitting itself more closely to what it's been exposed to, and building up a larger database, for lack of a better term, of experiences. I mean, you could draw. You could draw parallels.
Yeah, there's a parallel to us.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Obviously there is, but the associations that we make, well, it's just a different level of complexity. And then, of course, you get to the mysteries of consciousness and self-awareness as well, which aren't present in these AI algorithms.
Do you want that to remain a mystery, like consciousness and the idea of a soul? Like, is there a part of you that's devoted, like that part of your paradigm or worldview or whatever you want to call it is like, we need to be sort of unique? Like, I'm just like, what if we're not, and we just don't like that idea? So we start with the axiom that no, we have a soul and that can't be replicated. Because that's exactly like what you said initially. So I was just wondering, are you kind of emotionally invested in that idea, or and I'm not saying you specifically,
that's a good question. I mean, I think there is some, what do they call it?
Like, I need there to be meaning, and I'm resistant to this idea.
Thinking that humans are the center of existence. Do I need that to be true? Probably not. I mean, look, if aliens were real, which they're not, and we discovered them, which we won't, and
but you saying that's reinforcing.
I'm joking, right? But
yeah, I know. But you kind of believe it, or you do believe it.
If there were aliens and they appeared, and we had whatever friendly contact with them there was, and we learned that humans aren't unique, my life would continue on, and I would continue to enjoy the things I enjoy, and I might try some alien foods every now and then, and I would recognize that aliens exist, and it wouldn't send me into a spiraling depression.
Assuming they wanted to coexist peacefully and you weren't like locked in a cell or whatever.
Yes, right. It wouldn't upset my world. So do I need humans to be the only sentient, conscious, soul-having beings? No, but we are.
Well, not only just the fact that, like, what if we're not, like, we apply this term sentient, like, it's baked into our, like, existence, is that we have meaning, we have a soul, there's a purpose, and our goal is to find that out and be a good, moral person. Like, all of the, like, these are all, like, kind of axiomatic truths. I know I kind of overuse that term, but I'm just saying, I'm trying to push to see if, like, we're devoted to those truths fundamentally, because it would be potentially very depressing, arguably freeing, to be provocative and go, ooh, it'd be interesting to learn it's all kind of meaningless and you can just sit back and enjoy the ride. That's a freeing thought, but or a depressing one. To me, I lean toward very, very depressing, which is why I don't even like to entertain it, except in like an intellectual discussion like this. Like, as soon as this discussion's over, I'll go back to believing like in the soul and like purpose and meaning, and I'm driven by something greater.
Yeah, I think empirically, people who believe that humans have souls and a purpose, fare better in life, and are happier than nihilistic people who think we're just bags of meat floating through space.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
don't have a purpose. So you can question my motivations, and wonder if I am willing myself to believe these crazy things, that we can't prove. But ultimately, you
I
can't.
certainly don't think it's crazy.
No,
by
sure.
the way. I don't.
Yeah, but you can't prove that their absence either. So as far as I'm concerned, it's a stalemate, and in the presence of this metaphysical stalemate, we can just look and see who has the better outcomes. And I think that's a rational way to look at it. And the people with
and if it have better outcomes, doesn't that tend to speak to the truth of it?
I think that it might. I think so. Yes.
I mean, that's
I think
that's a great argument for God, right? Is like those who tend to put purpose outside of themselves, and there's something greater than themselves as why they're here. They tend to fare better, and so that seems to reveal some truth about the universe.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. Like there is some order to the universe, and we can glimpse pieces of that order, bits and pieces of that order. And that order is revealed in reality, in truth, in what happens. And you can look at what happens, and like I said, the people who believe there is a purpose tend to fare better, and the people who don't tend to fare worse. Not always, but I think that gives us a clue as to the nature of the universe. That's how I look at it.
Let me bring it back to the beginning of this discussion. I think one of the first things out of your mouth was something along we are biological machines or biological machinery that really jumped out at me, because I wanted to bring up this point. It's like, since we introduced machines or computers or technology, we also mentioned that the parallels can be drawn between ourselves and machines or technology, and we even things like let me file that away in my brain for later. Like we speak so deeply in metaphor to ourselves being machine-like, just because it's useful. But is that a problem? Because that starts to make that link that we are just complex machinery, and that I just wonder if that's an issue of using that metaphor. I mean, it's useful to a point, but what it does is it primes us to start to believe that we're no different than complex machinery. It paves the pathway for the argument that I was trying to push you on and say, like, yeah, we're just complex machines.
The word memory existed before computers.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So there's blending, right? Like, we used a lot of our computer terminology are models from real life, files and folders and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah, that too. That's true.
So there's just a big blending. And
I guess that the idea of metacognition is a relatively new idea, thinking about thinking, and it's developed in a world of technology. So all of our metaphors were grabbed from machinery and computers, which were also, like you said, we name things like folders,
Yeah, and we have to simplify as well. Like, we don't, in common parlance, or when you're teaching your kid to use the iPad or whatever, you're not going to talk in terms of... we don't understand how the brain works in depth. And so we literally don't have the terminology to refer to some of these things. We don't know how memory works in the brain exactly. We know the concept, and so we apply that to our machines that do kind of the same thing. At least a similar thing, being able to recall information at a later time.
You're totally right. It's just that's what we went with is computers and machines. We didn't use something else, but it's all so blended anyway. Maybe it's not that interesting of a point. I just think that's the metaphor we went with early on, and like it's there now. So then it makes us seem not that different than machines. So.
Yeah, I just think that's a cursory. That's not thinking about it too deeply. Yeah, the analogy is there, but I don't know. I mean,
it just exposes the limitations we have to understand the brain.
You could make the same case when people say, "Oh, we're just animals." We're just animals too.
Or a bag of meat.
Yeah, bag of meat. All of that stuff. Like, there are lots of reductionist ways to compare humans to whatever, and try to kind of sidestep the fact that we are,
or something sinister, like we're just a virus on the earth.
Yeah, all of that kind of stuff. There are lots of easy ways to diminish how unique we are. And like, I don't really know why exactly people love to. Maybe it's virtue signaling to try to say that we think we're so great, but we're really not. We're just bags of meat. We're just animals. Virus on the earth, cancer on the earth, whatever. Like, it allows you to claim some moral high ground.
Well, in David Foster Wallace said this in This Is Water. He said, in the practical world, there are no atheists. We all worship something, whether it's money or, and he said, and he actually, as an atheist, I believe he like said, God is one of the only things you can worship that won't turn around and punish you, because if you worship money, you'll never have enough. If you worship power, you'll end up seeking it and bullying others and whatever. So you can just see how it can be like really screwed up. So I think in a modern society that attempts, or postmodern society that attempts to sort of degrade or belittle the existence of God, they need something else. So it becomes, I don't know, like save the earth, or and then you need to in order to create your messaging, you gotta just say like, oh, we're meaningless, and it's just nihilistic is the end point here, and it's really depressing. And so then you have you have a lot of people with mental health issues. I mean, all of it's connected.
That's a really good transition to what I wanted to talk about.
Let's do it. Yeah.
So have you ever heard of Munchausen Syndrome by Proxy?
I have, actually.
Do you know what it is?
But would you tell me more?
Okay.
Let me. Do you want me to offer up?
No, that's okay. I just
okay.
I'm just a little surprised that
You're in the seat here.
I'm surprised you knew what it was, but so I
screw you, Ben. I know things.
Oh well. I read about it a little bit recently, and I found it fascinating. And there's still some mystery to this particular syndrome, and so I wanted to discuss it with you and see what you thought. So, Munchausen syndrome by Proxy. It's also known by another name, factitious disorder imposed on another, as apparently the more
sounds more descriptive,
the more appropriate term. But I like Munchausen syndrome by Proxy. I think it sounds cooler. It is a mental illness and a form of child abuse. So what happens is the caretaker of a child, usually the mother, but very rarely the father, they make up symptoms. Or they cause real symptoms in their child to make the child appear or actually be sick. So they themselves don't necessarily exhibit any kind of sickness or illness, but they foist a manufactured, either literally or figuratively, illness onto their child.
Yeah, man, it's twisted
for reasons unknown. And,
I mean, I can think of a lot of reasons.
I can too. Well, the suggestion, if you read any of the descriptions of Munchausen syndrome by Proxy or the Wikipedia page or whatever, it tells you that one of the notable things about this is that it's not done for external reward. But I take issue.
Says that?
Yeah, it says that. But I take issue with that. I don't think that that's true. And also, it's continually classified as a mental disorder. And I'm not sure that I buy that wholesale either. And this is, I guess, the key question I wanted to ask you in the context of this particular disorder. What's the difference between a mental disorder, if you want to classify this a mental disorder, and just simply being an immoral person, or a person taking advantage of someone else for your own gain, or for whatever potential reward? I don't know how and why they classified this as a mental disorder, and to me it seems like a solid argument could be made that it's just crappy people exploiting their children.
Yeah, at what point does it become clinical?
Yes.
I mean, it's useful to make it clinical because it seems
it's a pattern.
Unusual that it's this pattern that they've seen that emerged distinctly like this. But you would think the underpinning jerkishness, selfishness, whatever, or I just would want to back up and say, like, I can imagine someone starved for affirmation and becomes a parent, right? Like they have a kid, And being a parent's tough, and you can read a lot of books on it, but it's just so complex. And you want affirmation for being a good parent. Kids are sick. I'm imagining the kid legitimately gets sick at some point early on, and then it's, interestingly enough, as a parent, like, doing the right thing is confusing, but when they're sick, it's less confusing. It's take them to the doctor, get them the meds they need, get them physically well.
Yes.
I mean, it's the same reason that physical pain makes a certain degree, like, people self-harm when they experience all this abstract trauma in their brain, and they don't know how to soothe, but you can soothe a cut on your wrist. Like, I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying there is a degree of logic behind it.
Okay.
But just as I would say cutting yourself to manage that pain, I would say that feels like a mental illness. Like, you're something so twisted, even though, like, just because it can be logically reasoned through doesn't mean it's not mental illness. And just so I can reason through Munchausen by proxy, doesn't mean that I don't think it's some clinical, like, it's so twisted. I mean, you're opening up the question of, potentially is all mental illness,
I'm just wondering,
just assholery,
well,
selfishness manifest.
I wouldn't necessarily make that case and put that forward, but I do wonder, how much does the will, our ability to influence our own behaviors and actions, how much does it come into play in something like this, or in other things that we classify as mental disorders? And I wonder if we haven't given a little bit too much weight to, I know this is extremely provocative, but there's a lot of buzz about mental illness lately, and people talking about how important it is and that it rivals physical illnesses in terms of, impact. And all of that may be true, but I think we really underplay how important our own agency is in combating or overcoming these mental issues.
Well, I have to agree with you. I think we're, like, over-diagnosing ADHD.
Yes.
When I do think, of course kids have, I'll use the term for a second. Of course kids have ADHD when they live in a TikTok culture and then have to sit still in class and do something comparatively far less sexy, far less flashy, far less, like sustain attention for an hour or whatever the class period is, and then do that 6 in a row or whatever. I mean, that's impossibly difficult when you normalize fast culture. So I appreciate the discussion on mental health because we're trying to understand humans, but I think if we're at the beginning of the discussion historically of mental health, trying to deconstruct taboos and actually talk about it instead of kind of burying it, I think we're going to wildly overdiagnose and minimize agency and autonomy.
Well,
so I just think where we're at.
Think about this too. This is another provocative topic that I've brought up before about the excessive empathy that we have as a society as opposed to sympathy, and we did a whole talk about that.
Yeah.
And the empathetic thing to say is that, oh, it's not your fault. You have a mental illness. You have ADHD, or you have whatever it is. It's not your fault. It's the illness's fault, and you're just a victim of the illness. I'm not saying that this is the case, but it's very easy to fall into that empathy-giving state instead of saying, you should behave better. You should focus. You should exert your will, which you have, and overcome this tempting behavior, maybe even biologically addictive behavior, and change your path a little bit. Like, that's the harder, tougher route to say. And then there's the empathetic way, and maybe there's a blend of both that are needed.
I think there has to be a blend. I think it's twofold. I wish the conversation were like, look, these are the cards you dealt. Yeah, they're crappy cards. Now let's play the best game you can with them. And so I think the discussion is, we might be going, oh, you were dealt this crappy hand. Look how crappy it is. You're never gonna win. Like, there's no way. You only have you have a 2 and a 7 offsuit, or whatever the worst hand in Texas Hold'em is. Like, how are you ever going to make anything work with this? And if you emphasize the hand you're dealt too much, then the person with the cards is going to say, just like, what's the point? Whereas I think it could be useful to know, okay, I was dealt a 2 and a 7 offsuit. Like this is tough. And then like to try and whether it's kind of falls into those growth mindset views of the world is like, okay, I think there's a lot of comfort in understanding who you are and what you have. And so if I know I have a tendency, a capacity, a propensity to be attracted to down these paths that could disrupt my life, it is comforting to know, hey, I'm not like I have this thing, and like I need to accept my monsters. I need to acknowledge them, but I'm not going to use them as an excuse. Now that I know I have these monsters, I can fight them better. And that's that's step one, is acknowledging the monsters. But that's just step one. It's arguably the most important, because you can't get to step 2 without it.
Yeah.
But we have to say, these are my monsters, and I'm going to now engage and try to fight them. You could even say hug them and like be gentle with yourself, but also like hug them and then turn it into a chokehold.
Right.
Because like I think if I'm articulating your frustrations and mine too, it's that we say, oh, you have these monsters. So like the monsters, you know how they're monsters. They're scary. They win. They're bigger than you. So
well, there's an additional complexity, and especially with this Munchausen syndrome, that monsters gain you a lot of attention and sometimes adulation. And so for an individual person, sometimes it's beneficial to them in certain ways, most often in the short term, to say, look at me, I'm a victim, look at what I have. And that, I guess, would be Munchausen syndrome just itself. It gets even worse because now the parents or the caretaker can also claim some sort of virtue or adulation, or maybe even monetary compensation by saying, well, my child is the victim. I'm the good person taking care of them. And it gets even more complex because traditionally this has been physical illnesses. Like there are examples of mothers poisoning their children so that they legitimately are continually sick, or shaving their heads and forcing them to ride in wheelchairs. There's a
show called The Act that's about this. It's on Hulu. It's amazing. It's great. That's how I know about it.
Oh, all right. I see. I didn't know about that. Anyway, those are the cases that you think of traditionally, but now we live in an era where mental illness has skyrocketed, and you have suicide attempts, but especially by teenagers. A lot of younger kids are having additional issues, and it makes me wonder: has Munchausen syndrome by proxy also skyrocketed? And maybe a lot of these reported causes of issues are due to parents foisting these manufactured issues onto their children, whether literally manufactured by poisoning them or figuratively manufactured by telling the child that, oh, you have ADHD, that's why you are doing
having
this.
them tested and
all
of that.
All of that.
That's, you're totally right, because just this week I had a student who I would call this a typical male boy, 9th grade student, like forgets his book to class half the time. Mm-hmm. He's actually a sharp reader and participates in class. Sometimes he fails the comprehension checks because he just doesn't read. And I would just say this is totally within the standard. Well, I got an email from a doctor saying he's being tested and to fill out this form. I probably fill out 10 of these a year, man. And I've had even administrative people say, look, it's just true that more and more people are having their kids tested, and in a lot of ways this is how it's portrayed to me. In a lot of ways, this is good. This is best practices. Just why wouldn't you want to have your kid tested to figure out if there are issues so you could get the tools to best serve them educationally? Like, it makes sense. So we're gonna have a lot of kids diagnosed with things, and it was actually a speech trying to kind of calm the teachers, going, because then we get these what are called IEPs, individual education plans, in which you have to put, it'll say oh, testing gets extra time. Well, all of a sudden extra time means I have to hand them half the test or a quarter of the test. But in an English class, it might be an in-class writing essay with one question. So what do you do? Is it fair to let them leave and come back at lunch when they could have worked on, it just gets, or they have to be removed from their peers and get into, be in an empty testing room. Well, what if I have 9 kids with that accommodation?
Right.
To say they have to be tested alone? It's just that's not feasible.
Yeah.
And so there's this pushback with teachers going, look, to us, it's very, very clear that kids are overdiagnosed, and yet we're a largely empathetic bunch, a little overly so. And so it's weird to have this, like, even the most empathetic are deeply skeptical. And in the rat race of college admissions, you need to, like, if 30, and I'm not joking here, if 30% of students are getting like advantages, and you're like, I want an advantage, and so you go in and you just, take a couple tests and get slapped with that diagnosis, because they hand that out like it's candy. I swear they do.
Right.
So anyway, so if you're a parent that wants to look, I think this is your point. If you're a parent who is also looking for affirmation, and your kid seems a little down or whatever, go get them some pills, and then the world at least makes sense. All right, I'm getting them pills. They're going to see their therapist. I'm a good parent. I responded in love. And I'd like to think that someone who, like a teenager, in a world that is not insane, then that would be like a very few number of kids instead of 2 or 3 a class for me that are on pills and need a therapist. And that's the pills and the depression. That's one sector of kids, and there's another with there's another 4 or 5 per class with ADHD.
Right.
And I'm not even kidding you. And my class might be like 16 to 20 kids.
Yeah, it just seems a little unbelievable. I
know. I'm not even exaggerating those numbers.
Yeah.
That's like
it seems like we've reached a point where we're seeing something in the data that is representative not of truth but of some other complicating behavior. And I know people have been puzzling over the increase, especially in mental illness for young people, and not just mental illness, but suicide attempts and hospitalizations. So
right, because that's a big deal. That is not if there are deaths, that's not an exaggeration. Like
right.
That's not like, oh well, like, no, they are killing themselves. Like, that means something. And it also speaks to these dangers of social media, and we've talked about it.
There we go.
Lot,
that's what I was going to say. Like, people, even us, have done a lot of attribution of that to social media, and I do think it's a large component. But I'd never considered before this additional abstract layer. It's like one layer removed, and the parents also could be like this part of this could be foisted upon these young people who are eventually experiencing these events because of some sickness in our society that causes the parents to behave in this way. Like, our incentive structures are set up such that parents are rewarded for harming their children in many ways, and then the children are obviously harmed, and they accrue some rewards for that too. So we have this really sick system, and I think a non-trivial part of it does go back to that empathetic nature, overly empathetic. Again, for people who didn't listen to that episode, I don't think empathy is worthless or bad. I think we just lean far too heavily on it, and I think we're observing a lot of the negative effects of that.
I guess I hope, this is the optimist in me, that this is just a growing pain of trying to understand the human mind, trying to be open about breaking down taboos and saying there's a lot of internal processing, which includes pain, that we don't fully understand. And because this is a relatively new, historically speaking, conversation, we're really sloppy about it, and we're trying to be loaded word, but progressive about it. Like, we're trying to say, let's dive in, let's actually deconstruct this and like not make it a cultural taboo. So I want to, like, I tend to agree with everything you're saying, while saying, like, I don't know the alternative. I don't think this sort of buck up, tough it out is always bad. Mm-hmm. By the way, they're cleaning my window. I'm on the second story right now, right outside. But he's got a big brush, and so I'm sorry if you can hear that.
I can't hear
it's
it,
just like,
but
they probably do this maybe, I would guess, once every year or two would be my guess, and they're doing it right now. It's kind of funny. It's kind of distracting.
Well,
but what do you think? There's got to be. It's kind of this balance, right? It's like, oh, you seem sad. Let me get you a psychiatrist or psychologist and some pills, and then. Or, oh, you're sad, buck up, who cares? Like, both of those seem wrong to me,
Yeah, I mean, I think that, let's see. I think, well, it's just very complicated. I was having a conversation with someone recently who is in school to be a therapist. And I suggested that I think that as a society, we are far too reliant on therapists and therapy, and that I was a little skeptical of the whole practice of therapy because to me, it seems like a really good friend can be can serve all the roles that a therapist could and more. And so, if you have a really close friend that can give you honest feedback and can listen to your problems, then you're doing way better, and you probably don't need a therapist if you have that. And this person vehemently disagreed.
Surprise.
Yeah, I know, right?
I mean, you're really threatening their like whole worldview, right? Like their axioms
I know,
were threatened
but
with you pressing.
But it was very disheartening for me because you would think of all people, a therapist would be able to understand the depth of a relationship between, two people, friends, and in fact, their job in a way is to build up that sort of close connection with their clients so that they can understand their issues. Their job isn't even to advise. Their job is to listen and help their client work through their own issues, ideally, although that may not be what always happens. And in a friendship, a lot of those roles are there as well.
I agree with you, but do you think as a friend, like I do have a sense of duty to you to give you honest feedback, but simultaneously, I also have a duty to our friendship or a loyalty to like one, and so I guess it wouldn't be my job anyway to say things that would hurt you, but it would be my job. I say job, but you know what I mean. To ask questions, or I mean, honestly, if you were doing something so bad and harmful to you, like my job would be
to push back. You're
yeah. If you started saying, "Hey, I'm gonna start doing heroin," I'd be like, I wouldn't just say, "Do you think that's the best course of action?"
Right.
I would actually get more into the advice, if not something even more severe, and say, "No."
Well, that's what I'm
not.
and that's part of what I'm saying. Therapists are restricted from doing a lot of that. Their hands are tied by regulation and professional courtesy and so on. And so you get a small fraction of what a good friendship can be, but not all of it. And so to me, it's obvious that a good friendship is therapy plus. It's therapy, but better. You get more than that because you get the benefit of someone who knows you far better than a therapist can. And, they have the experience of history. They've observed your behaviors over time and can use that information.
I mean, I think a good friend and a quality and intelligent person. So you've got all of that with me. So yeah. Yes.
Now, I mean,
but
I will say
the average idiot is not going to have the sort of thoughtfulness to. I mean, really though.
Sure, and that's why
certainly, someone with a distance, they don't have, they're not as invested, and they've been trained to ask really good questions.
Totally,
and
totally.
probe,
Look,
so.
I'm not.
There's utility.
There is utility, and I'm not saying that it's a worthless profession. I just think that again we have an over reliance on it, and to kind of bring it back to the parents' behavior, it's very easy for them to just push their children off into some therapist's office and say, oh well, they're going to fix the problem instead of actually doing the work of building the relationship and being a role model and a guide to their children. And I think a lot of parents are guilty of, kind of neglecting that responsibility. And that's another reason why we are where we are. And again, just to address another issue, you use the loaded word progressive. I think that another issue is that we are kind of discarding a lot of the wisdom of the past. A lot of the traditional parenting roles, the traditional way that you should raise your kids. We're throwing that all away in the name of progressivism, or maybe by necessity because of the way the times are changing and technology and so on.
Yeah.
But whatever our reasons for throwing away that old wisdom, the fact remains that we have thrown it away and we're kind of lost without it. And so we're trying to kind of feel our way around.
That's a good point.
And inevitably, when you're groping around in the dark, you're going to run into the door or, stumble or something. And I think that's kind of what we may be doing collectively. I'm not even ascribing ill motives to any of that. I'm just saying it's no wonder that sort of thing is happening.
And it's annoying too that I guess this is my biggest frustration is I do just by like suicide numbers alone think that people are in pain more than they used to be. And so our solution is to talk like cognitive behavioral therapy and medicine, and it's just instead of saying, hey, can we examine how we've constructed society and what like those are the real like
I mean, that's
if we've
important,
designed
but
a society
it's just a big problem, though. You know,
it's a big problem. It's a huge problem. But I'm saying that we've designed a society so quickly that we're not currently ready for, and we're just continuing down that path and going, well, what you gonna do? Like shoulders up, hands, palms up, shrug shoulders, whatever.
Yeah.
Just like I don't know what to do, and like. But like we're just gonna continue to be sick and kind of like try and talk it out a little with a stranger who's got like a 2-year degree,
an increasingly
some social worker, like
degree.
and throw some. And you know how medicine, and you would know this more than I would, but it's just sort of like here, let's flood your body with some chemicals that may or may not do that, and it'll certainly do a lot of other things too. It just seems like it's really despairing to think that like. People are in pain and we're putting band-aids on it instead of like changing behaviors. I mean, I guess real cognitive behavioral therapy can change behaviors, so that can be profound.
Yes.
So I don't want to downplay that. That seems important to me, to change perspectives, and if you change perspective, then you might change behavior. Like that reasons through for me.
Yeah, definitely.
But,
I don't want to totally, I don't want to throw out the entire profession. I think there's a lot there, and a good friend may be able to do all of the listening and advising and the assistance with understanding, but they may not be aware of techniques, particular behavioral techniques that they could use, like exposure therapy or whatever. They may stumble upon some of that naturally, which is nice, but a therapist could be good for actually having some repertoire of techniques that they could use to try to help someone.
I don't think it's even that as much as the authority that they have. I think the real problem with like a friendship is if I say, hey man, you should try this when you feel stressed, you'd be like, thanks. But if a professional does it and you're in the right headspace where you're desperate enough to go and drive to them on Tuesday afternoon and do this, and they tell you to do it, they're like, you're like, oh, this degreed person with authority has told me to, and I'm invested. It's really just about the investment of the person, of the patient. Because once you assume the role of patient, you might be more willing. Anyway, yeah, that's so that's the utility, is more that it's like marriage counseling or something like that. It's not any like, obviously at the end of the day it's you and your partner, but if you've dedicated a space on Thursday night or whatever it is, and you've gone and you're paying money and you're like investing, and then you have someone to help guide, like that's useful to me. But you're right. I don't know how useful. Like, it just seems to me that, like, well, theoretically, you should be able to just do it.
Yeah, that's my sense. I mean, again, like I'm just thinking out loud for all of this, and I'm not willing to totally denounce anything, but it just seems like if people were real about it, then
let me connect you to this. Like, we are. Like, when you throw out God, back to that, you throw out God, you are not humble anymore. Like, the belief in God is inherently humbling. Like, you are not the end all be all. You throw out God and you can't humble yourself. But the act, if you're just desperately looking for something new and like whatever, well, the act of entering into the patient role, you're saying, I will exercise humility here.
That's an interesting point.
So our new gods are,
our therapists,
and AI or whatever, whatever we were saying earlier. we need gods. We will be worshiping, and if you refuse to worship like an end all be all God, capital G, then you're gonna just worship, progressivism, and be kind of like confused about it.
Yikes! Well, that's a good place to end.
Yeah.
Over.